Thank you very much, and again, to your team, thank you for the service you've done to the country here. The former FBI Director James Comey said this week that your report vindicates him. Is that a fair assessment of your report?
I think the activities we found here don't vindicate anybody who touched this.
Okay. Let's run a clip here. This is what Comey said in 2018. It would be nice to have sound. Do we have sound? Okay. Never mind, I'll read it. Director Comey, the reporter is asking him, "Can I ask you a question on FISA abuse? It's a major issue for the Republicans. Do you have a total confidence in the dossier when you used it to secure a surveillance warrant and also in the subsequent renewals?" This was asked in December of 2018, about a year ago. Comey, "I have total confidence that the FISA process was followed, that the entire case was handled in a thoughtful, responsible way by DOJ and the FBI. I think the notion that FISA was abused here is nonsense." Would it be fair to say that you take issue with that statement?
Certainly our findings were that there were significant problems with
So when Comey speaks about FISA, you shouldn't listen. You should listen to Mr. Horowitz. He's not vindicated, and to be concerned about the FISA warrant process is not nonsense. Christopher Steele, is it fair to say that he had a political bias against Donald Trump?
Given who he was paid for, there was a bias that needed to be disclosed to the court.
Does it seem that he personally had a bias, not just because he's on the payroll of the Democratic Party, but he...
Well, we found in the course of this and heard from Mr. Orr about his comment to him that he was desperate to prevent Mr. Trump's election.
Again, this is the guy that provides the dossier that gives the warrant over the top against Carter Page. He's paid for by the Democratic Party, and he personally believes it's bad for Donald Trump to win. He's marketing the dossier, which is a bunch of garbage, to anybody and everybody. To me, that's important. Is that important to you?
Any evidence of bias is supposed to be disclosed to the court and to the department lawyers.
Okay, so let's play this out. In January 2017, when they figure out the primary subsource and they talk to the Russian guy that provided Steele all the information, what should the FBI have done at that moment?
Two things. Reconsidered internally where things stood, and most importantly, told the lawyers at the Justice Department who they were asking to help them get a FISA.
And there are 5 people in that interview, right?
Correct.
Okay. Are you going to make sure those 5 people are known to the higher-ups?
They are all part of the referral that I mentioned earlier.
Okay. Did they have a duty to report to their supervisors and eventually to the court exculpatory information?
Absolutely.
They did not.
They did not.
Why?
That's the question I can't specifically answer for you.
Can you say it wasn't because of political bias?
On decisions regarding those FISA matters, I do not know their state of mind at this point.
So we're talking about actions now and trying to figure out what would motivate people. Do you think Comey and McCabe should have known?
That's a challenging question. As we explain in the report, there were multiple briefings up the chain, including to the director and the deputy director. We don't have a clear record of what precisely they were told, and as you know, as information flows upstream.
Would you be surprised if it didn't make it up the system? Something this earth-shattering?
I'm not going to speculate as to what might or might not
Did Strzok know?
So Mr. Strzok's, there were 3 iterations of the team. Mr. Strzok actually transitions off as on this matter in January of 2017. So it's not, I'd have to go back and look precisely.
Well, in February, he mentions that Steele can't verify.
Correct.
So pretty clear to me that it got up. So the court should have been told they were not.
Correct.
How did they describe this meeting to the court in the warrant application?
So in the second and third renewals, the last 2 applications, they told the court that they had interviewed Steele's primary subsource, upon whom Steele relied in writing the reporting, and that they found the primary subsource to be credible. They did not tell the court or the department lawyers any of the information which would have allowed them to know that if you found the primary subsource credible, you couldn't have also found the Steele reporting credible.
Did they mislead the court?
That was misleading to the court and to the department to not
So
know
they
that
did
information.
two things in January 2017. They failed to report, obviously, exculpatory information, and when they did report to the court about the interview, they lied about it.
But let me add also
Okay.
that a year later, in June of 2018, when the department sent a Rule 13 letter to the court informing them of other information that had not been provided to the court, the department still didn't know about the primary subsource information. And so when the department in its letter said that it still stood behind the FISA applications,
Very interesting.
they referenced the primary subsource again and the fact that the FBI found that person credible.
So are these the best and brightest we have?
Well, certainly the FBI, the actions of the FBI agents on this were not
So
up to the
McCabe
standards of the FBI.
handpicks these people. Are they representative of the department as a whole, in your view?
I certainly hope that that is not the way others are following these practices.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so let's fast forward now to June of 2016. Mr. Kleinsmith, who's he?
I'm going to defer on speaking about people who we don't name
Okay.
specifically in the report.
Who's the guy that altered? Tell me about the guy that altered the email from the CIA.
So there was a lawyer in the Office of General Counsel at the FBI who was the line attorney working with the agents and counterparts at the National Security Division on the FISA. And that individual in June of 2017, as the last application was being prepared, and immediately following Mr. Page, Carter Page, going to news outlets after word of the FISAs hit the news media, and said to the news media, I was someone who worked with U.S. intelligence agencies, not someone who worked against them. Lawyers and agents went and said, we've got to figure out what's the story. Is that what happened? The lawyer, the OGC attorney for the FBI, reached out to a liaison at the other government agency that was at issue, asked the question, was Mr. Page a source or a contact of some sort for your organization? The report back in the email referenced the August 2016 memorandum that agency had provided to the FBI that I mentioned in my opening statement the FBI did no follow-up on, and said what that liaison's general recollection was that Mr. Page was or is someone who had a relationship with the entity, with the other government agency, but that the lawyer should go look at the report for confirmation. The lawyer then had a conversation with the FBI agent who was going to be the affiant, the person who swore out that final application, FISA application. The agent told us, and is detailed in here, was concerned about what he had learned about what Page said publicly and wanted a definitive answer, as he put it, as to whether Page was...
Because if the agent, if Carter Page was actually telling the truth, it changes one of the predicates to consider him a foreign agent.
That was the concern of the agent. Yeah. And it was the agent who was going to be swearing out
If true, it would be helpful to Mr. Page.
It certainly could have and may well have been very helpful to Mr. Page.
Okay.
But it's, at a minimum, without any doubt, it should have been known, it should have been followed up on, and it should have been told.
What did this lawyer do?
The FBI. When the lawyer had the discussion with the agent, and the agent said, I want to see it, do you have it in writing? The lawyer said he did, and he forwarded the liaison's email, but altered it to insert the words, and not a source, into the email.
So he doctored it.
He doctored the original email from the
It
liaison.
made it look like the CIA denied knowing Mr. Page.
It flatly stated that he was not a source.
Okay, now just imagine, folks. You're representing somebody as a defense attorney, and they do this to one of your clients. I hope somebody pays a price for this, whether you like Trump or not. So why did Mr. Kleinsmith, that's who we're talking about, you don't have to say it, I'll say it. What motivated him to do that?
It is unknown as to precisely why he did it, but we
This is the
cite.
Viva la Resistance
Right.
guy.
I was going to mention, but we reference in here
Yeah.
the text messages you mentioned, and
Yeah.
we have
Yeah.
not made a determination, but rather, as we note in here,
Yeah.
when we learned this, we notified the Attorney General and
Now,
the FBI Director and referred it to.
You did a great job. The old adage is if you wake up and the lawn is wet, you can assume it rained. If you got a guy who hates Trump's guts from day one, thinks Pence is stupid, and everybody who voted for Trump's an idiot, and you give him power over Trump, maybe you're making a mistake. Or again, maybe, all these people who had these biases did nothing about it, maybe, maybe not. It doesn't really matter. We know what they did. Is it fair to say that after January 2017, when the guy who gave Steele all the information disavows the dossier, that not only they should have told the court, they should have slowed down? Do you think the second and third warrants had a legal basis after that point?
We don't reach that conclusion, and I'm not going to.
Would you have submitted a warrant application as a lawyer?
Let me put it this way. I would not have submitted the one they put in,
Okay.
but no doubt about it. It had no business going in with that.
So
those
what I
words.
want you to know is that in January 2017, the whole foundation for surveilling Carter Page collapses. Exculpatory information is ignored. They lie to the court about what the interview was all about. Is that a fair summary so far about the January 2017?
They certainly misled, it was misleading to the court.
Okay,
what it was.
fair enough. And in January, about 6 months later, when they find more information that could be helpful to Mr. Page, they lie about it. Do you feel like Mr. Page was treated fairly by the Department of Justice and the FBI?
I don't think the Department of Justice fairly treated these FISAs, and he was on the receiving end of the FISA.
You would not want to be on the receiving end of this, would you?
I would not want agents or anybody failing to put forward all the information they're obligated to tell the court on. I was in AUSA. I've seen what can occur if that
I would be
happens.
very comfortable with you investigating anybody, because I think you know the difference between getting somebody and trying to find the truth. That's what this is all about. Counterintelligence investigations. What's the purpose of a counterintelligence investigation?
It's to identify potential threats to the nation.
Okay, this was opened up as a counterintelligence investigation, right?
Correct.
And we know the Russians were screwing around with the Democrats, right? That's one of the concerns. It was the Russians who acted in the DNC.
Correct.
Got their emails.
Correct.
So it's okay for everybody to be concerned. What are the Russians up to? I get that. It's okay to look at what's the standard to start one of these things?
There are two types of investigations. Both of them have relatively low thresholds, as we point out here, for predication.
Okay. So let's assume for a moment that relatively low threshold was met. Would it be fair to say that if you stop there and looking at your report, you're making a mistake?
You would be making a mistake. There is 400 pages here for a reason.
There's a mountain of misconduct. Please don't ignore it. So my point is, if this is a counterintelligence investigation, who are they trying to protect? Who should they be trying to protect?
Well, if it's the threat outlined in the friendly foreign government information, you would be looking to protect the election process,
Right.
which would include
The candidate?
the campaign, the candidate, and the American people.
Okay, so did they ever brief Hillary Clinton about efforts to foreign influences involving her campaign? Do you know?
I've heard that, but I don't know for a fact.
They did. Good for them. And they stopped it. Was there ever a defensive briefing given by the FBI, the Department of Justice, to Donald Trump about the concerns?
There was not.
What would you call a counterintelligence investigation that never had a protective element?
I'm not sure. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, if without eventually trying to protect the entity being influenced, is it legitimate?
It would depend on each fact and circumstance.
Here's what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah.
If you're opening up a counterintelligence investigation to protect somebody, you should do it. Did they ever try to protect Donald Trump from foreign influence?
They did not brief him, and we lay out on page 55.
As a matter of
our report,
fact, when they went in and gave a vanilla briefing, the Russians are out there, you better beware. Didn't they have an FBI agent do a 302 on the defensive briefing itself?
They sent one of the supervisory agents from the Crossfire Hurricane team to the briefing, and that agent prepared a report to the file of the briefing
About what Trump said?
about what Mr. Trump said and what Mr. Flynn said.
Okay, so when we get defensively briefed tomorrow, would it be okay for FBI agents to open up 302s on what we said?
We have very significant concerns about that, and I would note that in Director Wray's response,
So-
he underlined that that would not occur going forward.
To those who can set aside how I feel about Trump for a minute, under the guise of protecting the campaign from Russian influence, they never lift a finger to protect the campaign. Every time they had information that the people they suspected were working for the Russians, it went the other way, and they kept going. When they did generically brief candidate Trump, they sent an FBI agent in to do a 302. If this doesn't bother you, you hate Trump way too much. Was that FBI agent spying on Donald Trump when he went in there?
It was a pretext meeting that I'm not going to, the process by which they have to do these meetings.
If you don't have a foundation for a warrant and you continue, I'm sorry, go ahead. Do you need to say anything else?
I'm sorry.
There's no, okay.
The incident, the event, the meeting was a briefing, and the FBI considered and decided to send that agent there to do the briefing. So the agent was actually doing the briefing, but also using it for the purpose of investigation.
Okay, now I hope that doesn't happen to us tomorrow. I'll be really pissed if it does. Okay, so let's play this out. They never told Trump about the concerns. Is it fair to say there came a point to where surveilling Carter Page became unlawful?
I will let the court decide that. The court has this report and will make that decision.
Let's put it this way. If you don't have a legal foundation to surveil somebody and you keep doing it, is that bad?
Absolutely.
Is that spying?
It's not, it's illegal surveillance. It's not court-authorized
Whatever
surveillance.
illegal
under FISA.
surveillance means, they did it. So all this stuff that they didn't illegally surveil Trump's campaign, they did because they had no legal basis after the January 2017 data dump by the Russian guy to believe that the dossier was reliable. They alter exculpatory information in June of 2017 that would have further proven that Carter Page is not a Russian agent. He was actually working with the CIA. Let me ask you very directly. Do you believe Carter Page is or ever was an agent of the Russian government trying to do harm to his country?
I'm going to refer to the evidence we found here, which is that at the end of this,
Thank you.
the FBI, at the end of these FISAs, told us that they had found no evidence to corroborate the allegations in the Steele dossier related to him.
It's not that clean, folks. They knew and they ignored it, and they continued to surveil him. Why? Why did they doctor the email? The people who continued getting warrants after they knew it wasn't legitimate had a bias that reeked. How this thing was opened, I don't know, but I can tell you Mr. Durham has a different view. I respect your view that they may have been a lawful predicate, giving them every benefit of the doubt, but one of the people pushing this was Peter Strzok from day one. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a task at hand here to make sure this never happens again, to hold people accountable, change our laws, save the FISA court if we can, and I hope this chapter in American history is never repeated. And finally, if you report that this 434-page report says lawful investigation with a few irregularities, you're doing a great disservice to the American people. Thank you very much.